Good evening. If you do have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please, thank you. Right, massive welcome back to Steve Mera, a man who has immersed himself in all things paranormal. Now, Steve has had to do a slight diversion for his original talk on the mysterious bodies of Peru, but some of the Peruvian talk will be covered. So please welcome Steve Mera.
Thank you, Rob, for having me back. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about ancient discoveries. Bob, if you can give me a shout about 9 o'clock, yeah, because I can't see the clock from here. Yeah. Okay, so this is what we're told. You know, evolution. You know, it's we've talked about this before. There's been a few giggles as well. It's getting weaker and weaker by the day. You know, and somebody once come to me. You know, somebody came to me only about a week ago and said, and put an idea forward. They said, you know what, we've been around allegedly 300,000 years, humans, and we've become so smart in that time, in 300,000 years. Some will even argue it's only 150,000 years. And yet when you consider the length of dinosaurs that walked on this planet, and we go back to 65 million years, someone once asked the question, where did all the smart ones go? And think about it, it's interesting. So what we're told 200,000 years ago, this is what we look like. And this is what we were doing. We were kind of living in caves and foraging and scavenging and stuff like that. And around about 10,000 years ago, we would kind of become farmers and agriculture, you know, and planting things and living in societies. More modern times, it looks pretty much like this. So you can see, obviously, there's been numerous different theories over the years as to, you know, how we've lived, where we currently are now. If we look at societies such as Peru, and this lecture is going to be covering a number of locations. This is Machu Picchu, by the way. Has anyone actually been there? Okay, it's an amazing place. Machu Picchu in Peru, which is a shaded-off mountain top with a city on there. Bolivia is another place which will come into the discussions this evening. And of course we can't forget Egypt, can we? You know, but I'm not going to cover the normal things that you often hear about Egypt. It's about the things that you get off the tour. You know, like we would do, you know, when we go to Peru and there's tours to, you know, Machu Picchu, whatever, get off the tour. Go and look for yourself. Go around the backside of the mountain. You know, you'd be surprised what you find, which is not listed, which is not recorded, which is not talked about. Things that probably they don't want documented. Sacsayhuaman, which is again in Peru, which is an ancient fortress. They say it's called, the Inca made this, but clearly I say the pre-Inca made these amazing fortresses using huge stones. And apparently using these things, Inca stones, the bronze tools. Now, anybody who's an engineer here will realise something very quick. That stone is often harder than copper and bronze. It's not much stone, it isn't, to be honest. And using bronze and copper tools on stones such as granite just won't work, because the first thing it's going to wear down is not the stone, it's the tools. But this is what we're told. These incredible sites around the world, just like Egypt, have been made by as simple things as this. So we look at Inca. We say, okay, what do we know about Inca? Yeah. Well, the society moved eventually from Lake Titicaca, and we believe that's probably due to a vast drought that happened, and they had problems with water and stuff, so they relocated. But initially, they came from islands such as the island of the Sun, which is on the shores of Lake Titicaca. And you can see some of the old Inca buildings there. And you can see Inca stone buildings here. Now, when you look at these Inca stone buildings, there's kind of two different types. There's adobe and there's stone. But they look significantly different than these massive, massive stones that they tend to be using in other locations. A completely different method of building. And yet it's all done by the same people. I'm going to show you tonight that with the evidence, you'll see for yourself that that is not the case. This is another Inca building, yeah, and in this case, what they've used is adobe brick. It's like bricks made with bits, hard stone and mud. Again, nothing like the things that we see, such as the Inca fortress of Sacsayhuaman. What about this place? Tiwanaku, again in Peru. It looks nothing like this, does it? But they say that these people, these Inca, made both these around about the same time. Doesn't add up. Does not add up. The Gateway of the Sun, yeah. Not only is it, cut from a single piece of rock, unfortunately with land movement over the years, there was a crack that appeared, which is a shame, but nevertheless though, cut from a piece of rock. And what's really interesting is there's a picture of what looks like an elephant on it. I don't know if you can see it, it's just right there. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 tusks and a trunk. Now, the only time they had elephants in that location would mean that this particular item is a lot older than what is necessarily thought to be Inca. It would make it pre-Inca. There's a little bit of evidence on that. Apart from that though, the construction's incredible. It lines up to the sun, it's statistically perfect. The same sort of thing that we've seen around the world, in Egypt, all over the world. Puerto Rico, Bolivia, Egypt, and so on and so forth. Things like this, incredible flat surfaces. People, believe it or not, have cut their fingers running it down the corner of that stone because it's that sharp. Perfect. But apart from that, how do you manage to chisel out a 4mm strip in the stone? By the way, this is granite. This is round about, I would probably say level 6 or level 7 on the hardest stones of the world. The harder, the highest probably 10 being diamond. Drill holes. Yes, drill holes, perfectly spaced apart and drilled out. When you actually look in there, you can see the drilled core. How did they drill this? What did they drill it with? Certainly something that, how would we drill this? Well, we'd have to use diamond tip drills for a start, I'd have to go at it quite some time, because it's not easy cutting through granite. Nevertheless though, there it is. Why is it even there? What were these holes for? Nobody really knows. Probably one of the most significant constructions is the HBlocks of Puerto Rico. Most of us have probably seen these. They're amazingly placed together. You can't put them together. They're designed to slot, like an old Meccano set, slide in together, and then one's in between and one's on top, making it probably the most concise and indestructible wall that's ever been built in human history.
Christopher Dunn's done a lot of work.
Christopher Dunn has done a lot of work on that.
He's a man,
Yes, yes.
original.
Yeah. Other discoveries in the same location to pre-Inca buildings under the ground, we have dug up skulls. These skulls aren't your average skulls. They're highly elliptical. They're elongated, they're stretched. Now this is a little bit more than just boarding. Some of these are actually in a museum in Peru. And when you conduct some research and look at these, you'll realise very quickly that the brain mass must have been larger than the humans, because the skulls are significantly huge compared to the human skull, to the average human skull. Also, they'll even say that analysis hasn't taken place on these. I believe they probably have. I'm just not giving those results, but they are saying they've had them for several years, and research and analysis has not taken place on these skulls. I find that very hard to believe. You can see you've got a brain mass here. This is not your average boarding. We've seen boarded heads before. Now this is what the Inca are said to look like. Images and documents, paintings and things like that. We know what the Inca looked like. What the Inca didn't look like is that. But these is what the skulls are being dug up in Peru, around locations of these huge stone buildings, which are said to be Inca built. But who are those guys? We don't know. No idea. Of course, due to a drought, there was relocation, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, of Lake Titicaca. And they moved to just outside Cusco, in a valley, which was rich for growing plants, and set a society there. Now, when they got there, the Inca came across another type of construction by another tribe, which is not often talked about. And these were known as the Wari, the constructions of the Wari Indians. Again, it's very, very similar to Inca, but just a different tribe. Not much difference. So generally what we're saying is there then that was pretty much the idea around about that time. This is the way to make stones, walls and buildings using these small stones, just like we do. Lake District, yeah. Yorkshire. We use small stones. But why do we use small stones? That's it, exactly. Because it's easier to do. You know, why should we go for huge stones and then make our life a hell of a lot, harder?
My trade's a bricklayer.
Ah.
I can see the difference between that and the other.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely at the other end of the
There's no comparison, is there? And yet we are told they're all Inca.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where the line. Getting to a point, they're lying.
I know what large stones are like to lift.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You can pick something up, say that big.
Mm.
As it gets to that big, you won't even shift it.
No. And these were dealing with, stones higher than the size of this room. Why do it?
Are these food terraces?
Yeah. These are stone terrace walls, yes, constructed by the Wari Indians in Peru. Not the Inca Indians, the Wari Indians are slightly different, but had the same construction. Now, here's a typical example. This is pre-Inca. And what did the Incas do when they found this? They built on it. This is Inca construction on top of pre-Inca construction. It's clearly no different. You can clearly see the difference here. Massive, massive differences. And what we are told is this whole building is Inca built. No way. And it's the same for many other buildings. This here is known as the Corichana, first Inca building in Cusco. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is at the heart of Cusco. It's huge. It's perfect. It's really, really difficult to get even a blade or anything between the gaps in these stones. No mortar was used, unlike other buildings done by Inca. And in that location, you can see some of the blocks, and they've actually been tied. In other words, they use these are known as keystones. These are keys made out of metal, poured into these locations on the stones to tie them together. They've done that because they want these places to withstand earthquakes. So whoever the pre-Incas were, they knew what earthquakes were, and they built them against them falling down, just as the Egyptians did exactly the same thing, and they're found in China, they're found in Vietnam. Whoever this society was, the pre-Incas were also in China, were also in Bolivia, were also in Egypt, were also all over the world. It would seem there's a society that had the same cultural knowledge and expertise in building things like this, who knew how to build buildings that can withstand any size earthquakes.